الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم الحمد لله رب العالمين والصلاة والسلام على أشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين خاتم النبيين رحمة للعالمين بالقاسم محمد وعلى أهل بيته الطيبين الطاهرين المعصومين المظلومين أما بعد فقد قال الله سبحانه وتعالى في كتابه المجيد وقوله الحق بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم يا أيها الذين آمنوا اتقوا الله حق تقاته ولا تموتن إلا وأنتم مسلمون صلوا على محمد وآله السلام عليكم ورحمة الله. Last night I was talking about the Quran itself, some of the features of the Quran, and the need for interpretation of the Quran. And I was mentioning also that interpretation is an ongoing process. Because the human consciousness develops and changes with time, the way that we see a text will change with time. But at the same time, I should caution, this thing came up in the Q&A session, that we should not feel that we are able to just on our own interpret the Quran the way that we like it. Like every other discipline, interpretation, religious studies, the Quran is a specialized field. But those who are entrusted to do the interpretation have a duty to interpret it faithfully according to the needs of the people and the time. I was not able to finish the lecture last night because we were running short of time. But one of the themes that we talked about, if you recall, that Allah talks of the atom's weight of justice, atom's weight of good, that whoever does an atom's weight of good will see it, and so on. And that tells us something about the justice. Justice in the Quran, as we shall see today, is a very central component. So much so that if you remove justice, then you remove God from your life. There is, to give you an idea, that when it comes to the morals of the stories of the Quran that I was talking about yesterday, when it comes to the political government, people many a time say today Islam is against democracy, Islam is pro this as far as the government is concerned. The Quran does not outline or tell us the form of government. It wants us to work it out ourselves. It talks more about the purpose of the government. And the purpose of the government is related to and deeply connected with the concept of justice and beauty. Adl and ihsan. Inna Allah ya'muru bil adl wal ihsan. God commands you. He doesn't ask you. He doesn't recommend you. He commands you that you should establish justice and beauty. At the same time, when we are looking at the Quran, I think many a time, this is just my view, many will disagree, I know, that we need to differentiate between laws and principles. Principles are those values which are common in all human beings, and they are eternal. They are immutable. They cannot change. So, for example, lying is wrong. It's a principle. Killing is wrong. That speaking the truth is good. Honesty is good. Those cannot change. But laws are culturally and historical specific. In other words, we have laws today in Canada which might change with time, which have changed with time. You look at, for example, some of the laws, Canadian laws, I will assume, even in the last century, and compare it with now, you'll find that the law books, the statutes have changed. In American law, for example, up to the last century, I recall, it was forbidden to cross the road on a Sunday in Rhode Island. Those kinds of things, because you were not supposed to cross the road on Rhode Island on a Sunday. Now, those may not make any sense to us today. But that's what I mean, that laws change with time. And similarly with the Quran. In other words, whereas principles are eternal and immutable. Immutable means not capable of change. But laws can, and as we shall see as we go along, maybe tomorrow and the day after, laws can and sometimes must change. Otherwise, they will not be reflecting the society. Religion, we believe, is perfect, yes. But our understanding of religion is always evolving. It's an evolutionary process. Furthermore, nobody has the right or exclusive right to speak on behalf of the whole of Islam. In other words, I cannot come and tell you and say what I'm saying is the one and only possible way of looking at Islam. It's not a monopoly of anybody, unless the person is the Prophet or the Imams or, of course, Allah Himself. And this is where we need to distinguish between the authoritarian and authoritative reading of a text. Any text for that matter, whether it is the Quran or any text. Authoritative is that which comes from God. Because it is from Allah, it has authority. In other words, it is something that is coming from the one and only, that is Allah Himself. Whereas authoritarian is different. It is a human construct, an individual, a person interpretation. And authoritarian is problematic is because the person who's authoritarian, he or she, normally Sahiya, he closes the meaning of the text because he believes that his interpretation or his understanding is the one and only possible way. He, or can be she, makes his voice as the only voice, as if his voice is the voice of Allah, as if he is speaking on behalf of God. This, by the way, is the fundamentalist view. This is how fundamentalists impose their views and their voices on others. Do you remember we talked of the principle of takfir? Many a time I feel that it is we as human beings who are imposing, who are speaking to the Quran, rather than letting the Quran speak to us. This is what is called the danger of intellectual despotism. In other words, intellectual dictatorship, if you like. There is only one way to interpret a text. Let us remember, and I said this before earlier, I think on the first night, that religion is multivocal. It's not univocal. In other words, there are different interpretations, different ways of understanding it. Many a time we dominate and subjugate others, ironically, through the Quran. As the Quran tells us, La ikraha fid din. There is no compulsion in religion. Just as we cannot impose faith on others, we cannot impose an interpretation on others. We can offer an interpretation, yes, but we cannot impose it. My sisters and brothers, the more we open the minds to the Quran, the more the Quran will open our minds and will open itself to us. Let us not forget interpretation, and this is the core of the issue here. It's a blessing, and at the same time it can be a burden. Interpretation is a blessing because it allows us to interpret a text according to different times and to different needs. In other words, to accommodate change and to accommodate different circumstances. It can be a burden. It not always is, but it can be a burden simply because it can be monopolized. It can be completely monopolized by some and imposed on others. Any text needs to remain open and alive so that it can speak to us today as it spoke to us in the past. It is only then that the Quran becomes dynamic and vibrant. It is only then that the Quran can be relevant to the needs of the people. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali Muhammad. My topic for today is also about engagement. We've been talking about engaging the Quran or engagement with the Quran, engagement with Allah. Here we're talking of interaction with each other. In other words, the ethical dimension. Because the Quran is deeply concerned that we not only should be good human beings, but we should also be social beings. In other words, to interact with each other. And therefore the Quran places a lot of emphasis on the mu'amalat, how we connect with each other. And of course the root here is that of ethics. In our world today, we always talk about being politically correct. I've never heard being saying morally correct though. We tend to, I think we have demoralized ourselves, if you know what I mean. Demoralized means morality suddenly has become less important, especially where we live in. The key word here is akhlaq. And akhlaq is the plural of the word khalq, which means our outer acts, how I appear, how I behave, and so on. These are all part of akhlaq. See, we tend to be more concerned about a particular stain on a piece of cloth, whether I can pray in it or not. We don't seem to be so concerned about the stain in our character, in our behavior. So the word akhlaq then comes from the word khulq, This is the origin of the word. Khulq means the disposition in which we are created. In other words, the way that we are created, our inside, our inner being. And our akhlaq and our khalq, our acts are dependent on our khaliq. In other words, the one who created us. These are all connected with each other. Khalq, akhlaq, khaliq, the one who created us, and our khulq and our akhlaq must be reflected on the makhluqat. In other words, on our fellow human beings. So these are all interconnected, telling us that what we have received from the khaliq should be reflected on the makhluqat. The Quran is very, as I said, is very keen to emphasize our behavior, our ethical behavior. So it also tells us the ethics of the tongue, how to speak and what to speak. Interestingly, this is in chapter 14, verse 24. I'm not sure if you can see the number there. Alam tara kayfa dharaba Allahu mathalan. Haven't you seen how Allah gives the parables or examples? Kalimatun tayyiba, that is a good word. Kashajaratun tayyiba, it's like a good tree. Why? Asluha thabit. In other words, a good tree is deeply rooted under the ground. Wa far'uha fis sama, whereas the branches are in the sky. So a good word should be like that. It should originate from inside us. And it should be bearing fruits outside. Not just say anything. Just it should be bearing fruits outside. So we find that a person of high morality and ethics will always be strong and attract others. Because if our outer behavior and our outer speech is not connected with our inside, then our acts will stand to be hypocritical. The power of the powerless, my friends, lies in their morality. When a person has got high morals, nobody can touch him or her. Maulana Jalaluddin Rumi says it quite correctly, that nobody throws stones at a tree which has no fruits. You only throw stones at a tree which has fruits. So therefore, when somebody starts saying nasty things about you, it's not because you are bad, it's because he cannot stand the fact that you are so good. That is the essence of it. Ethics and morality. We often use these two words as if they are synonymous, as if they are one and the same, but they are not. Although they are closely related, there is a subtle distinction between the two. Morality refers to our character, our human behavior, and our conduct, whereas ethics is a discipline in itself, it's a science in itself. It's a philosophical examination of the principles. So morality is, shall we say, more focused on individual behavior. Ethics tells us how to behave, on what principles should we be behaving. So it lays down the rules of how an individual should behave, whereas morality addresses the proper behavior in itself. It is important for us to understand that in our theology, the Shia theology, that our moral knowledge is instilled in the human cognition. Now, let me just deconstruct that. It means that our behavior, knowing what is right and what is wrong, is within us. We are born with it. This moral knowledge, then, that is the knowledge of how to behave, can be accessed by all human beings independently of revelation. In other words, you don't need God to come and tell you that killing is evil. You don't need God to come and tell you that lying is evil. You don't need the prophet to come and tell you that attending my lectures is good either. So it's something which is, no, seriously though, Shia theology does posit that idea that morality is deeply rooted in the human conscious and can be accessed by all human beings regardless of their beliefs. Even an atheist, for that matter, knows what is right and what is wrong. This is what is called by the fitra. A fitra is the guide to what is morally correct. To put it differently, we are responsible, even without religion. We must have ethical boundaries which is guided by the conscious itself. I would say this, put it this way. Allah is ethical. That's why He has all those attributes that we recite in His name, right? Asma'ul Husna. and He behaves with us in an ethical way. And He wants us to respond in an ethical way. In other words, just as God or Allah is ethical, seen by His names, Asma'ul Husna, He wants us to respond not only to Him, but also to other human beings through our ethics. This concept of morality is rooted in Allah Himself, as I say, because Allah is ethical. And that's why the Quran says that if you forget God, it's as if you've forgotten yourself, because the root of our ethics comes from within us, which Allah has given us. So, وَلَا تَكُونُوا كَالَّذِينَ نَسُوا اللَّهَ. Don't be like those who forgot God. فَانْسَاهُمْ أَنفُسَهُمْ. Because when you forget God, God makes you forget yourself. Meaning that you don't have track of your moral values. This is in chapter 59, verse 19, excuse me. The ethical values of the Quran are also seen, are exemplified in the akhlaq of the Prophet. In other words, the Prophet himself lived that Quran in an ethical way. That's why the Quran addresses the Prophet. You remember that very famous verse? إِنَّكَ عَلَى خُلُقٍ عَظِيمٍ. You are at the highest level of akhlaq, the Quran tells the Prophet. I would also like to emphasize that there is ethics in every aspect of our relationship. There is nothing beyond ethics. In every act, there are the rights of others upon us. Not only that, ethics also affects our spirituality. To be spiritually empowered, we must be ethically empowered. If a person wants to be very spiritual, but if he or she is cheating, lying, etc., then there is a problem there. There is, if you like, a moral and spiritual evolution. The more we grow morally, the more we evolve spiritually. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ali. It is only then that we can better our relationship with Allah. We cannot truly love Allah if we do not love His creatures. If we do good to others, Allah does good to us, as we know. The more we forgive others, as I've said before, Allah forgives us. It's interesting that amongst the beautiful deeds that we are asked to do in the Quran is simply to forgive. We haven't really done anything physically. All you've done is forgive somebody. And Allah says, forgive because Allah forgives and Allah loves those who do beautiful deeds. We as human beings cannot be truly ethically pure unless we adorn ourselves with ethical morals and ethical etiquettes. Our ethics is connected not only with our action, but more importantly with our faith. There was a question asked here a couple of nights ago, that what about a person who doesn't believe? You can be ethical without believing, but true ethics is also connected with Iman. Therefore, wherever the Quran talks of Iman, it talks of Amal Saleh. In other words, doing good is integral to, is a part of Iman, not separate from Iman. If a person truly is doing faith, the way that we described in the first lecture, doing faith is not only to believe and to do faith and connect with Allah. Doing faith is essentially connected with how we deal with others. True belief is Amalus Saleh. You've heard this term many, many times, Amalus Saleh. In fact, the term Amalus Saleh occurs in the Quran 120 times. And there is a whole long list of what was Amalus Saleh. I will not go into all the details, but as you can see, it ranges a wide range of acts which the Quran describes, and there's more. This is just a brief summary. Compassion towards parents, that's part of Amalus Saleh. To next of kin, by the way, also. Your cousins, your brothers, sisters, all are part of compassion. They deserve compassion, and that's part of Amalus Saleh. Speaking well to and about others. In other words, they may not be there, but when you speak good about others, that's part of Amalus Saleh. Helping the orphans and the poor, forbidding the embezzlement of the orphan's property. Forgiveness, as I said, is part of Amalus Saleh. Forbidding homicide without a just cause. Forbidding murder, forbidding the burial of infants, forbidding zina, sexually immoral conduct, and so on. Respecting contracts, by the way. When you give your word, that is a contract. And respecting your commitments. forbidding commercial fraud, and so on, in terms of cheating others. In short, we cannot be religious unless and until we are moral in our behavior. The more good we become, the more godly we become. Sallu ala Muhammad wa alayhi. Sallu ala Muhammad wa alayhi. Another important point that I think we should note is that when we talk of an Islamic society, many people think that all we need, if you ever want to create an Islamic society, is the Sharia. And we'll talk more about the Sharia later on. But I am saying that Islamic society should reflect the divine presence, the divine akhlaq, not just the divine law. Islamic law, yes, important, but Islamic morality, if you like, is even more important than Islamic law. In other words, how we behave, the ethics, the divine presence are more important than just do's and don't do's. Immoral principles, my sisters and brothers, cannot be attributed to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. In other words, I feel many times that we have separated religion and morality. We talk more about the do's and don't do's of how to pray and so on, rather than the morals of prayers, the purpose of prayers. And it's not only prayers, even in our ethical behavior. When we separate religion and morality, this is what we get. We've seen cases of ISIS. What do? There they go, they say Allahu Akbar, they pray 2 rakat namaz and then go rape a woman. And for them, that is their religion. You get a person saying Allahu Akbar and going into the mosque and blowing himself up, and many other worshippers on a Friday. We've seen that happen too. This is a typical of what happens when we separate religion from morality. And I will go even further. I would like to say that since we as human beings belong to the same human family, all of us, whether you are Jewish, Christian, atheist, whatever, our moral values should be universal. They cannot be partial. In other words, we cannot show one level of ethics to Muslims and another level to non-Muslims. Our moral virtue and our morality should transcend and go beyond religious and religious community, because we have one common language as human beings. And what is that language? Of morality. Something that links us all. There are many differences between human beings, but there's one common denominator, that is moral values. People will agree to whether to believe in God, some will not believe in Him. So we have more differences in that sense, but there's one common theme that runs amongst all of us, and that is morality. It is because of this that you will find many a time that when it talks about ethical behavior, the Quran says, Ya ayyuhan nas. Because the nas understand the language of ethics. When it talks about Ya ayyuhal ladhina amanu, for example, or you who believe, there it will talk about Sharia, about halal and haram. But when it comes to a nas, it talks to the language that the nas understand, which is the language of common morality. This is a language that is familiar to all. My question to you is, do kuffar get less compassion from Allah because they do not believe in Him? When rain comes, does it say that I'll fall more on Muslims and less on non-Muslims? Rain is rain. It's a ni'mah from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The way to humanity passes through God. And more importantly, the way to Allah passes through humanity. Moral principles, the Quran is very, very clear, cannot and should not be compromised under any circumstances. Ya ayyuhalladhina amanu. The address is here to the believers. Kunu qawamin bil qist. That undertake the qist, that is uprightness or justice. Bear witness for Allah. وَلَا يَجْرَمَنَّكُمْ شَنَآنَ قَوْمٍ أَنْ لَا تَعْدِلُوا. And do not let a hatred of a people make you leave what is just. In other words, many a time somebody has done wrong to us, has violated us. We hate them, and yet we want to be unjust to them. The Quran says, no, even when you do not like a people or they have done wrong to you, your sense of justice should always be there. Because when we wrong others, in reality, we are wronging ourselves. Our moral compasses get altered, they get blurred, and above all, we lose track of our moral boundaries. In the West, by the way, you will have noticed that when somebody has got issues, the way that Hasnain was describing, and I'm not undermining that at all, but in the West in general, we tend to focus about, well, neurological problems, I don't know, psychological problems, and there are those problems. I do not deny that. But the West hardly ever talk about the issues of the soul itself, the inside. When somebody misbehaves or immoral in his conduct, etc., we always try and look, well, mental sickness. You know, Trump, every time there is a mass shooting, says, oh, there's a mental sickness somewhere, mental sickness. Well, only those, it takes, they say what? Birds of the same feather? Yeah, it takes one to know one, huh? But anyway, we won't go there, if you know what I mean. But in any case then, there are certain core values for ethical behavior that we, the Quran is telling us to undertake and observe. Four ethical values. Oops, I think I may have gone a bit too far. Yes, there we are. Four ethical values or steps. First, before we do anything good, we should know what is good. Otherwise, we'll just be acting out of impulse without knowing what we are doing is the right thing to do. So we should know what is good, and then we do good. In other words, we do those amalus salih. And we do it so frequently that we become good. Goodness becomes part and parcel of our character. You don't think about whether I should be doing or not, because it's part of you. And then not only do we become good, we generate goodness around us. In other words, when others look at us and they see us, they become that virtue. وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالْحَقِّ وَتَوَاصَوْا بِالصَّبْرِ صلوا على محمد. This is what we mean by ingrained goodness. That is the goodness that is generated automatically. It is within this context then we need to understand the whole concept of malaka. Malaka literally means the color of the soul, the property of the soul that we need to inculcate or put within us. That malaka comes about through proper training. In other words, the soul becomes used to that particular faculty, that particular color. So, for example, we need to distinguish between an act and a trait. An act is something that you do. Okay, you do it sometimes here and sometimes there. But a trait is something which is ingrained in you. It's a value that is deeply rooted within you. And how does an act become a trait? By continuous repetition. A soul acquires a trait so much so that we become that good and we generate that goodness all around us. So, to give you an example, all of us are potentially generous. We're not always generous, but we are all potentially generous. We can be. We can become generous by nurturing and inculcating the trait in ourselves, by continuously being generous. So, a person may donate a little bit here and there. That's an occasional act of generosity. That's an act. It's not a trait. A trait only comes about when it's automatic, something that you don't even think about. Generosity is just one example, by the way. So by repetition then, a soul acquires a trait so that it becomes that good. And not only by just occasional acts of good. When we forgive a person, we are ghafir. But when we forgive continuously, we become ghaffar. When a person hides the defects of others, he or she becomes a satir. But when we do it continuously, we become satar. In other words, the same word has a different form by a continuous act of doing it. The Prophet ﷺ was, not only did he show us akhlaq, but he also showed us how to perfect akhlaq. And that perfection only comes by continuously acting on it. That's why you remember the famous hadith from the Prophet when he says, بُعِثُّ لِأُتَمِّمَ مَكَارِمُ الْأَخْلَاقِ. I have been sent so as to perfect the morals. Not just to show you the morals, but to perfect them. I have an example here. It is actually from the Quran. It's not on the slide. That even when it comes to greeting a person, وَإِذَا حُيِّيتُمْ بِتَحِيَّةٍ فَحَيُّوا بِأَحْسَنِ مِنْهَا. The Quran says when somebody greets you, return not only the greeting, but be even a better greeting than him or her. When somebody says Salaam alaikum, don't just say Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullahi wa barakat. This is coming from the Quran, by the way, chapter 4, verse 86. It's not wajib. Returning the greeting is wajib, but it's not wajib to say Wa alaikum salam wa rahmatullah. But the Quran says it, that وَحَيُّ بِأَحْسَنِ مِنْهَا, then return the greeting, which is even a better greeting. In Allah ala kulli shayin hasiba, because God is watching you. So Allah is watching us not only in how we behave and how we pray, but even in how we greet each other. The Prophet himself, as the Quran tells us, وَالَّذِي بَعْثَ فِي الْأُمِّيِّينَ رَسُولًا يَتْلُو عَلَيْهِمْ آيَاتِهِ وَيُزَكِّيهِمْ, that Allah sent the Prophet not only to recite his ayat, but also to purify them in the akhlaq, in how we behave. The key component then is adl and ihsan. These are the pillars of society. My sisters and brothers, many a time we feel that, I've heard this term, Islamic justice. You know, as I said, the first, we make everything Islamic. Have you heard the term Islamic justice? There can be no such thing as Islamic justice. For the simple reason is this: justice is an independent ethical category. Justice is not Islamic. Do you understand what I'm trying to say? It is applicable to all human beings. Even a person who is not a Muslim is still required to be just. So do the Christians say Christian justice or Hindu justice? Somehow when it comes to Islam, we love this term Islamic, don't we? Islam says what justice says, not the other way around. In other words, justice is an independent category, and Islam says that you must follow that. Because whether you are Muslim or not, justice is applicable to you. I hope you're following the argument that I'm trying to make. And therefore you see that verse that I put in front of you. This is from chapter 57, verse 25. وَلَقَدْ أَرْسَلْنَا رُسُلًا بِالْبَيِّنَاتِ وَأَنزَلْنَا مَعَهُمْ الْكِتَابَ وَالْمِيزَانَ, that we have sent our prophets with the book and scales. Interestingly, sometimes many people say, why do we put this fatha, dhamma, and kasra? I'll show you an example here. If I can move a little bit here. لِيَقُومَ النَّاسُ بِالْقِسْطِ وَأَنزَلْنَا مَعَهُمْ كِتَابًا لِيَقُومَ النَّاسُ بِالْقِسْطِ. Okay, this is the key word here. If it was لِيَقُومَ النَّاسَ, it means the Prophet would have to establish the justice. But because it says an-nasu, it is the people who have to establish the justice. Can you see the distinction? The Prophet is sent to show them with the books and the scales, but it is up to the people to establish the justice, not just the Prophet himself. And that makes a whole difference between the dhamma and the fatha there. If it was an-nasa, it will be the Prophet is establishing justice over the people. Whereas an-nasu, they become the subject. They are the ones who are doing justice. So that goes to show this question of justice in Islam. That the people should undertake the justice. That's the translation of that verse. Not that the Prophet should undertake the justice. Hence, when we see injustice or oppression anywhere, that quality of justice surfaces within us, telling us that what has come about is wrong. More emphasis in the Quran than on justice, and we find that in the Quran there is more emphasis on fighting against oppressive regimes than establishing good regimes. Why? Because it's more difficult to fight against oppression than establishing a good one. Destroying evil is more difficult than establishing the good. Sallu ala Muhammad wa ala. Justice then, and moral values also, moral principles, there are no exception to it. What is legal in the Quran is also what is moral. And therefore we find that Imam Ali ibn Abi Talib alayhi salam says that if I was given whatever is in the seven heavens and in the earth and what is in between the earth and the heavens, if I was given all of that, just to take away one husk of barley from an ant, just one husk of barley from an ant, I would not do it. Because even that husk of barley is the rizq of that particular ant. That's the sense of justice that Ali ibn Abi Talib himself had. So what is legal in the Quran is also moral. We cannot have an immoral God. I remember, and I think I said this in a majlis recently, that when I was in England long time ago, I asked a local Maulana, I said, in England they have this habit, I don't know if they do it here, whereby people who don't have any work, they get money from the government. But here you only get it for 6 months like that, right? There you get it for as long as you're not working. In fact, sometimes it actually pays you not to work. It's more of an incentive because the government ends up giving you more by not working than you get by working. So I asked a particular Maulana when I was a student, I said, if a person is claiming what we call unemployment benefit, can he or she also work without showing it, figures? He said, well, it's unethical, but it's halal. And I am like, unethical, but halal. What we are saying really then is that Sharia is unethical, if you think about it. Well, to me, Sharia is not only an expression of Allah's will, but more importantly, of divine morality. There is no such thing as it is unethical, but it is halal. Because the Sharia is only righteous if it protects the rights and dignities of human beings. Therefore, many a time I feel, and we'll get more into this later on, that we need to connect the law and ethics. There's a deep discipline on this, a special discipline, I should say, on the connection between law and ethics. We cannot have an ethical God, but an unethical Sharia. Because the Sharia is supposed to reflect Allah. If Allah is ethical, the laws of Allah must be unethical. Must be ethical, excuse me. We cannot have the two separated. We need a reading of the Sharia which is more consistent with the ethical theology of the Quran. Unfortunately, and this is the reality, when you go and study in the seminaries, there's more emphasis, in fact, there's complete emphasis on the legal rather than the ethical aspect of Islam. Akhlaq is not taught in Qom or Najaf, let me be very honest with you. Maybe they might have a separate class on a Thursday. The Thursday there is like a Saturday to us here, when somebody is teaching akhlaq, but it's not taught. It is saturated. The houses are saturated with fiqh and usul al-fiqh. In other words, jurisprudence and the principles of how to derive laws. Even the Quran does not receive much attention. Now things are changing now, by the way. Now there are more university-like structure and there are degrees that you get, but I'm talking of the traditional seminaries. There is very little discussion on the role of ethics in Islam. So that's one thing I think that we need to look at. Allama Mutahari, now, I must admit this, that I have a bit of an issue here, is that sometimes if I or one of our Khoja scholars says something, wa wala wa musibata, huh? What I'm chinja, poor thing. In other words, if somebody says, one of us says something, say, my God, ban him and so on. But if the same thing was said by Mutahari or somebody for wearing a turban, mashallah, subhanallah, kya kehna, like he says himself that there is a lack of consideration of justice in our fiqh. He says it, and I've even got, I think the reference there. The book is called Faqih, volume 1, page 123. And so he says that many of our laws have become unethical because we do not study law with ethics themselves. So he says that there are issues which are problematic, and I find those problems too. That there are some fatwas which say that you must save the life of a Muslim, but not of a non-Muslim. We can accept organs from non-Muslims, but you cannot give one to them. I have issues regarding that, I must admit. There are even fatwas that I've seen that you can steal from non-Muslims. When we have, you may find this funny, but there are those, I can show you those. When we have unjust laws, when the laws are unjust, what we are saying in reality that Allah is unjust, na'udhu billah. Because the laws are reflecting Allah. We are imputing injustice to the lawgiver, that is Allah Himself. It is ethics rather than the inherited laws that must underline Islamic laws. My sisters and brothers, we must understand that the ethical reading of the law is based on the theory that moral values are universal. In other words, if laws are universal, our ethics, our laws must reflect those universal laws. One of the other dimensions that I want to talk about very briefly before we go to Masa'ib is even the ibadah that we perform. They should reflect our ethics. Because ibadah, when we pray, when we do the dua, one of the things that we should do, this is, by the way, you'll see this very, very clearly and beautifully in Dua Makarimul Akhlaq, where Imam Zain al-Abidin is teaching us how to ask for the best of akhlaq. Normally when we recite the dua, it's only about what we need and about ourselves, etc. But it should also be ethical, because ibadat not only enables us to touch the truth, to speak the truth, but more importantly, to live the truth. True ibadat tells us of the rights of others over us. This is what we are supposed to do when we do our meditation, by the way. It's not only controlling the mind, but also have I fulfilled the rights that others have upon me. To give you an example, this example is cited, the story is cited of Malik al-Ashtar, who goes to Kufa. He was living in Egypt. He was visiting Kufa, and he was walking through the streets, and you know, some people, they don't have anything better to do. Somebody just took some sand and threw it at Malik, knowing that this guy was a visitor here, not realizing that Malik was a very famous and prominent disciple of Imam Ali. And somebody told the guy, said, do you know what you've just done? Just thrown some sand at him and stones. Said, this is Malik al-Ashtar. He is the disciple and the governor of Imam Ali in Egypt. You better go and apologize. So the guy follows Malik, and he sees Malik has gone to the mosque of Kufa. And Malik is praying. After Malik finishes the prayer, the guy goes up to him and says, Malik, I'm very sorry. I did not know who you are. I should not have done what I did. And Malik says, it is because of you that I came to the mosque here. I came to pray for you. In other words, our ibadat should not be about ourselves only. It's also to uplift others. True ibadat then is about the rights of others over us, to speak the truth and to live the truth. Because when we sin, we not only do wrong, but we give in to evil. We lose track of our moral and spiritual compasses. Sallu ala Muhammad wa alayhi. One more salawat, please. Sallallahu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. Sallallahu alayka ya ibna Rasulillah. Ruhi wa jismi wa arwahul alamina lakal fida. Ya madhlum, ya gharib, ya shaheed bi ardi Karbala. I will always try to emphasize when I talk about Karbala, to speak even a few words about those who hardly ever get a mention. There were several heroes, many heroes that we hardly ever talk about. When we hear about the slave in Karbala, our mind automatically switches to John. In fact, he was not the only slave in Karbala. There were at least 10 of them. Whenever you hear, when you look at the list of people who were killed in Karbala, sometimes you'll see the name Mawla. Mawla has different meanings. Not only does it mean master, it also means slave. So for example, Tawa, you may remember, Tawa was a lady who actually gave refuge to Muslim ibn Aqil in Kufa. She was a slave girl. We hear of a Sulaiman who delivered the letter of Imam Hussein to the people of Kufa. Or Hur, when he defected to Imam Hussein, he also brought a slave, a Turkish slave. And as I said, there were many of them. Muslim bin Ausaja, when he dies, a slave girl mourns his death. We also hear the term black. Now these terms are very repulsive to us today, because we have a different notion of slavery. In those days, by the way, many a time people wanted to be slaves because they were well taken care of. It did not mean the sense of slavery that we have in the West. I'm not saying that it's a good thing, but I'm showing that there were different kinds of slavery in the past. So for example, John, whose actual name was Huway, he was free to go. He was a slave of Abu Dhar. Abu Dhar died during the time of Imam Ali. And that was about 30 years before Karbala. But John or Huway actually goes and joins Imam Ali and Imam Hassan. Imam Hussein says, I want to be part of this household. So he had a choice But yet he chose to be part of that household. Similarly, fidda. And the term black that we sometimes don't like to use the term, but in actual fact, in those days, Al-Aswad was somebody who was powerful, faithful, and loyal to the Ahlul Bayt. It did not connote the thing that we, the racist term that we understand with it today. So John then, he returned to Medina after Abu Dhar was exiled, if you remember, in Rabda. And on the day of Ashur, he also comes to Imam Hussein. And Imam Hussein says, John, you don't have to fight. You are free. And John says, I have served you and this household my whole life. How can I leave you now? And as John goes to the battlefield, he says in his rajas, there were poems that were being recited. How do the disbelievers strike the black person? He calls himself black because it was a matter of pride in those days. I will strike with the sword, defending the children of Muhammad. I will defend them with my tongue and my hand, and I will seek paradise through it on the appointed day. Ibn Shahrashub says this John was so brave that he killed 25 people before he himself fell. When he falls on the ground, Imam Hussein goes and touches his cheek, puts his cheek with the cheek of John, and says, Oh John, I give you the good tidings of the fragrance of heaven. There were very many other people who gave their lives. One of them was a person by the name of Abis bin Abi Shabib, from a very brave tribe. This Abis lived in Kufa. He was one of those who supported Muslim ibn Aqil when Muslim went to Kufa. Abis was the one who carried that letter of Muslim to Imam Hussein, telling him to go to Kufa. And on the day of Ashur, he comes to Imam Hussein. Abis had a distinctive mark. He had some scars on his forehead, the scars that he received at Siffin fighting for Imam Ali. Abis comes to Imam Hussein and says, Mawla, I will give everything that I have for you. Nothing is more dear to me than you, because I love you more than anything else. But now I want to give my life for you. Hussein allows Abis to go. When Abis is going towards the battlefield, he is recognized. Rabi bin Tamim looks at the scar and says, this is Abis. And he tells the army, people, this is Abis. He's not a lion, but he's a lion of all lions, to show that he is truly brave and courageous. Abis comes in front of the enemy and asks them, is there any hero amongst you? Come and attack me. Come and fight with me. Nobody would go and fight against Abis. Umar ibn Sa'd says, attack him from all sides, because that's the only way that you can kill Abis. When Abis is killed, he's so important to them that everybody claims that they are the ones who kill Abis. The soldiers, the Banu Umayyad, are quarreling amongst themselves as to who killed Abis. Ibn Sa'd was scared that they were going to fight amongst themselves. So he said that because of his bravery, all of you kill Abis. Azadarana Hussein, today was the 4th of Muharram. More and more enforcements came after Sa'd from Kufa, sometimes even from Damascus. The army of the Banu Umayyad was increasing. Very few were joining Imam Hussein. On the day of Ashur, as the battlefield had not even started, but from the speeches of Zuhair, the speeches of Hussein, the speeches of Habib, there was one person who was moved by their speeches. He listened to all of them. This was Hur. Hur is that person who stopped Imam Hussein in the middle of the desert. Hur is that person who received the favors of Hussein. Hussein, when he saw the army of Hur, he turns to Abbas, says, Ya Abbas, iskal qawm. Feed the community. Give them some water. Even the animals and the horses and the camels got water in the middle of the desert. When Hussein was praying, Hur would pray behind Hussein because he respected Imam Hussein so much. Whenever Imam Hussein would pray, after the prayers, he would deliver lectures to them to tell them that what they were doing was wrong. In one of these sermons, Imam Hussein said to the army of Hur, أَلَا تَرَوْنَ أَنَّ الْحَقَّ لَا يُعْمَلْ بِهِ وَالْبَاطِلَ لَا يَتَنَاهَى عَنْهُ. Don't you see that the truth is not being practiced and falsehood is not being forbidden, so that a believer can meet Allah on the right path? إِنِّي لَا أَرَى الْمَوْتَ إِلَّا السَّعَادَةِ. I do not see death except as a way towards everlasting happiness. وَالْحَيَاةَ مَعَ الظَّالِمِينَ إِلَّا بَرَمًا. But to live with these oppressors is humiliation. I will die on the right path, but I will never ever submit to oppression. This was Hussein. On the day of Ashur, Hur goes up to Umar ibn Sa'd, says, Ya Umar, truly will this battle take place now? We've tried everything, but it seems there is no other way. Is there a way to avert the battle? Umar ibn Sa'd says, no, we're going to start the battle soon. At that time, there was something going on in the conscience of Hur. He started searching his conscience. Muhajir bin Aus comes up to him and says, Hur, what is wrong with you? If I was asked who was the bravest soldier, I would say it is you. What's happening to you? Hur takes Muhajir closer to the tent of Hussein. He says, Oh Muhajir, listen to those voices. The children are crying out for water. Do you know whose children they are? They are the children of the Prophet. Little children crying out for water. And we have water here. The horses, the camels, everybody drinks water. But not Hussein and the children and the grandchildren of the Prophet. Inni ukhayyiru nafsi bayna al-jannah wan-nahar. I'm choosing within myself between heaven and hell. Oh Muhajir, I have done wrong. I must undo what I have done. You know what Hur does? He goes to his family and he says, whoever wants to join me can join me. I am going to join Hussein. Hur comes in front of the army of Hussein. He turns the shield upside down. In the Arab culture, when you turn the shield upside down, it meant you came for peace, not for battle. When Hussein sees Hur coming towards him, he turns to Abbas, Oh Abbas, my guest is coming towards me. Go and receive my guest. Hur comes to Hussein and falls at the feet of Hussein. قَدْ جِئْتُكَ تَائِبًا مِمَّا كَانَ مِنِّي. I have come repentant to you. Is there a way that you can forgive me? I am the source of all your trouble. If Hur is showing us how to do tawbah, Hussein is showing us how to forgive. You know what Hussein does? He lifts Hur from the ground and he says, Oh Hur, you are as noble and as free as your mother has named you. Your mother has named you well. You are forgiven, O Hur. Hur is one of the first ones to give his life for Hussein. He asked Hussein, Mawla, can I go and give my life for you now? Imam Hussein allows him. Hur comes in front of the army is surprised. Oh Hur, what are you doing? You are supposed to be fighting with us, not against us. Hur says, oh people, where are your consciences? When I saw and spoke to Hussein, I realized that what I have done is wrong. Hur fights against his own army now. A time comes when Hur falls on the ground. Imam Hussein goes running towards Hur. Oh Hur, I give you the good tidings of Jannah. I've seen in the riwayat, it says that when Hur fell on the ground, there were arrows on his forehead. Blood was gushing forth from his forehead. What does Hussein do? He takes the special handkerchief of his own mother and ties on the forehead of Hur.